A locked drawer. A forgotten vault beneath Balmoral. A letter in the Queen Mother's handwriting. Princess Beatrice thought she was attending a routine family review, but what she uncovered shattered every assumption about royal inheritance. Now, centuries of silent tradition are upended by a single name scribbled beside a list of hidden jewels, hers. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It began as nothing more than protocol, a quiet audit of royal possessions tucked away in rooms few ever enter, and even fewer question. Beatrice had attended dozens of these briefings before, nodding politely while archivists recited item numbers and preservation notes. She expected boredom, she expected dust. What she did not expect was a slim ivory envelope wedged beneath the false lining of a drawer no one had opened in years. Her name was written in unmistakable cursive firm, elegant, deliberate, the kind of handwriting that carried authority without ever raising its voice. The seal, pressed into crimson wax, bore the Queen Mother's crest, untouched by time, as if it had been waiting patiently for this exact moment. When Beatrice broke the seal, the air in the room seemed to tighten. The document inside was not sentimental poetry or a simple blessing. It was an inventory, meticulous, numbered, and shockingly extensive. Emerald chokers once worn during wartime morale tours, a sapphire tiara believed to have vanished during palace renovations decades ago, a diamond brooch rumored to have been gifted privately by a foreign monarch and never publicly acknowledged. Line after line revealed treasures no one in the current royal structure had catalogued, discussed, or even whispered about. And beside the final notation, underlined twice, were the words, "To be entrusted to Beatrice alone." There was more. A small notation referenced a key, the Balmoral key beneath the stag, a phrase dismissed for years as ceremonial folklore. Palace aides exchanged uncertain glances. One of them quietly admitted the key had always existed, displayed among symbolic artifacts but never tested. It had been treated as tradition, not function. Now that assumption felt dangerously naive. When Princess Anne was informed of the discovery, insiders say her composure faltered for the briefest second, her expression turning pale before hardening into something resolute. She asked to see the document herself. She read it once, then again, and she said nothing. Silence inside a palace is never empty. It vibrates. Within hours, whispers threaded through corridors carried by staff who understood the gravity without needing explanation. Why Beatrice? Why not Eugenie? Why not the future queen? The Queen Mother had been deliberate in everything she did. She did not make sentimental mistakes. If she had hidden jewels, if she had concealed them from monarchs and consorts alike, then this was not oversight. This was intention. Beatrice felt the weight before she understood it. This was not about diamonds or status. It was about trust, about being seen by a matriarch who understood power as something fragile, something that must be guarded by character rather than crown. And as the document was quietly secured and the ceremonial key retrieved from its decorative stand, one truth became impossible to ignore. This inheritance was not merely financial. It was symbolic. It was strategic. It was explosive. But as Beatrice tries to understand the depth of her unexpected inheritance, a darker question rises. What did the Queen Mother see in her that the rest of the family missed? The Queen Mother's vault was no myth, it was real, untouched for decades, and accessible only by one forgotten code. Now Beatrice stands before it, the only person with the key. What lies behind that thick steel door isn't just treasure. It's a legacy that many in the royal family would rather keep buried. Few within the family even knew the vault existed in any real sense. It was whispered about over the years, mentioned in passing in dusty palace archives, or dismissed as one of many exaggerated family legends. But tucked beneath a lesser-known wing of Balmoral Castle, behind layers of reinforced stone and obsolete security that hadn't been tested since the mid-20th century, the door loomed. The key retrieved days earlier fit the lock perfectly, and as it turned, not with force but with ease, it felt less like Beatrice was opening a vault, and more like she was unlocking a secret the monarchy had long hoped would remain silent. Inside, she found not just wealth, but history frozen in time. Tiaras glimmered under velvet cloths, brooches nested beside handwritten notes, and a ruby necklace lay gently coiled around a framed photograph of Beatrice as a child, laughing, unguarded, and sitting beside the Queen Mother in the palace garden. That image alone unravelled her composure. She collapsed to her knees, tears streaming, overwhelmed by the intimacy of the gesture. It wasn't just a gift, it was a message. I saw you. I chose you. Beneath layers of imperial gems were diaries, short reflections, and a single quote scrawled repeatedly. The granddaughter who understands restraint will protect the crown when others lose themselves. Among the jewels were pieces historians had Ng believed destroyed in wartime or lost through generations. A tiara last worn at Queen Victoria's Jubilee. A sapphire once thought gifted to a Russian duchess in exile. These were not ceremonial ornaments. They were artifacts, symbols of alliances, betrayals, and survival. Royal historians were summoned discreetly. Many stood speechless. One wept. The vault didn't just hold items, it held the monarchy's private, unfiltered memory. And yet, Beatrice made a choice that stunned even the closest aides. She didn't immediately share the full contents with the rest of the family. Not out of selfishness, but out of reverence. She needed time to understand it all. Time to grasp why she had been chosen as the vessel for this inheritance. She feared that if the wrong hands touched these objects, if they were reduced to power plays or ceremonial spectacle, the Queen Mother's trust would be betrayed. As news of the vault's existence began to ripple through Windsor, confusion gave way to unease. If Beatrice now held the monarchy's most sacred heirlooms, what else might she inherit? Power, after all, is not always passed through titles. Sometimes it is buried and meant to be discovered by those strong enough to carry its weight. As the vault door closes behind her, Beatrice realizes the jewels aren't the true weight she's carrying. It's the Queen Mother's message, and what it may mean for the power struggles unfolding around her. Among all the granddaughters, Zara, Eugenie, Louise. Why was Beatrice singled out by the most revered woman in the royal bloodline? The answer lies in a trail of forgotten letters, private tea meetings, and one deeply emotional moment that Beatrice never shared. You. Until now. Long before vaults and secrets entered the picture, Beatrice had quietly built something sacred, something the royal family rarely acknowledges anymore. A bond rooted not in ceremony, but in genuine affection. As a child, she often visited Clarence's house, not for state functions, but for soft, unpublicized afternoons with the Queen Mother. The two would walk the gardens in quiet companionship, sipping tea under shaded arches while the world presumed the Queen Mother was alone. During those moments, it wasn't about protocol. It was about legacy, about stories passed between generations, about strength that didn't need spectacle. Beatrice was never told outright that she was different, but she felt it in the way the Queen Mother looked at her, not with expectation, but with trust. In one now unearthed journal entry, the Queen Mother wrote, "Of all the girls, only she listens with both ears and both eyes. Beatrice is the last Windsor with the old heart." Those words weren't meant for public consumption. They were confessions of a matriarch whose every move had been dissected for nearly a century, and in Beatrice she saw a kindred spirit, someone who didn't seek the spotlight but didn't flinch in its glow either. The turning point, insiders say, came during one of the Queen Mother's lowest moments. Widowed, weary, and facing the disintegration of family unity behind palace walls, she had locked herself away for days. Beatrice, then barely a teenager, found her sobbing softly in a drawing room, crownless, makeup smudged, utterly human. Without a word, Beatrice sat beside her and held her hand. No questions, no performance, just quiet presence. The Queen Mother never forgot it. Years later, she referenced the moment in a sealed letter found in the vault, writing, "She comforted me when no one else noticed I was broken. She is the soul that steadies a wavering crown, but loyalty, in the monarchy, often carries consequences." When the royal family fractured publicly during Harry and Meghan's storm, Beatrice didn't grandstand. She remained neutral in public, yet fiercely protective in private. Her quiet refusal to be weaponized during that time especially when pushed to take sides, impressed the Queen Mother's surviving confidants. While others fumbled, Beatrice stood still. While others leaked, she locked down. That restraint, that sense of duty without drama, echoed everything the Queen Mother had valued but feared was disappearing from the bloodline. In light of this history, the inheritance no longer seems random. It seems deliberate, a calculated act of preservation. But not everyone sees it that way. Within the palace walls, old alliances are stirring. And as news spreads of just how deeply the Queen Mother trusted Beatrice, so too does unease. Because in this family, being chosen rarely comes without a cost. But as Beatrice's star rises, others in the family are beginning to view her as a threat, and not all are willing to stay silent. What began as stunned silence quickly turned to disbelief, then bitterness. Princess Eugenie, once Beatrice's closest confidant, now questions the very foundation of their relationship. "Why not both of us?" she whispers, as tears fall in front of a palisade. The rift may now be irreversible. The sisterly bond that once held firm in the shadow of palace politics is now fraying with every passing spur, every glance, every unanswered message. For Eugenie, the revelation of Beatrice's exclusive inheritance struck not just as a surprise, but as a betrayal. At a family brunch held days after the news broke, witnesses noted Eugenie's stiffness, her silence, her refusal to even look in her sister's direction. Those close to the scene said the air was thick with tension. And when the formalities ended, she left Balmoral in haste, her car vanishing down the drive before dessert had even been served. That wasn't coincidence, that was heartbreak. Behind the stone walls of royal tradition, confrontations are rare, but this time the whispers say it couldn't be contained. The sisters met in private chambers later that evening, voices raised behind closed doors. One aide confessed they heard the phrase, "You should have told me," echoing down the hall. Beatrice, stunned and cornered, had no words that could fix what had already fractured. Eugenie had always believed their future roles would be shared shouldered together, not handed down to one in isolation. She wasn't angry about the jewels. She was devastated about the silence, and that silence cut deeper because of the history between them. Years ago, when Beatrice faced private scrutiny over a scandal that nearly derailed her image, it was Eugenie who took the fall for a royal engagement mix-up, silently stepping back so her sister could avoid further attention. It was a sacrifice never made public, never even acknowledged by the palace, but the sisters remembered. And that memory now sits like a bitter shadow over everything that followed. In recent public appearances, the change is palpable. They stand further apart. The warmth, once effortless, now feels staged. Cold glances replace shared smiles. During a garden ceremony in Windsor, a camera caught the moment Eugenie turned her back as Beatrice gave a statement. No words were spoken. None needed to be. The silence between them is now louder than any royal decree. This wasn't just about jewels, it was about recognition, equality, trust. And in Eugenie's eyes, it was about being seen as more than the younger sister in the background. For her, the Queen Mother's decision felt like an erasure, one that not even time may fully repair. But sisterhood wasn't the only bond breaking. The Queen Mother's decision sent tremors through every royal rank, including one who viewed the jewels as rightfully hers. When Queen Camilla learned of the bequeathment, she reportedly left a royal council meeting mid-session. "This changes everything," she said coldly, according to palace insiders. But behind those doors, it wasn't just anger, it was fear. The jewels weren't mere trinkets. They were once considered symbols of the Queen's protectorate, a symbol Camilla believed belonged to her. The timing could not have been more humiliating. With her position still undergoing subtle challenges from within the ranks, Camilla had been carefully tightening her grip on the traditions of monarchy. The Queen Mother's jewels were not expected to re-emerge, certainly not with a signature diverting them away from the reigning queen consort. To her, they weren't just sentimental ornaments, they were validation. A coronet of quiet authority meant to bolster her reign, piece by glittering piece. But now, with that legacy handed solely to Beatrice, her image had been punctured. And in the most unforgiving circle of all the inner family, What followed inside Clarence's house was nothing short of volcanic. Sources close to the family report that Camilla confronted Charles within minutes of hearing the news. Raised voices pierced the antique walls. For a woman known to keep her fury tightly leashed, this outburst was a crack in the porcelain. She demanded clarity. She questioned oversight. And then came the order her private secretary was told to trace the vault's legal status, a phrase that sent palace legal teams into a silent scramble. It was clear she wasn't going to let this pass without a fight. The fallout became even more obvious during an official gathering days later, when protocols were updated to begin preparing ceremonial lists. Camilla's step-granddaughters, once considered rising stars in the monarchy's softer public image campaign, were suddenly absent from any mention regarding heirloom discussions. The message was subtle but sharp. Camilla's inner circle had lost its place in a conversation now centered on Beatrice, and she knew it. In the days that followed, Camilla shifted from fury to calculation. She began quietly requesting an audit of all remaining heirlooms still housed in royal estates. Under the guise of organization, she sought to reassert control, piece by piece, jewel by jewel. But it was more than that. Reports suggest Camilla feared what Beatrice's inheritance truly represented, a form of symbolic succession, not based on bloodline hierarchy, but on the Queen Mother's silent judgment. The jewels, in Camilla's eyes, were no longer just decoration. They were a power symbol. And in Beatrice's hands, they threatened to eclipse Camilla's entire position. But while Camilla plotted legal channels, a surprising royal ally was about to stand beside Beatrice, one whose silence carried the force of history. She has always been the monarchy's iron spine, never shaken, never stirred, but when Princess Anne stepped into the fray, backing Beatrice in a quiet yet seismic move, it was clear this wasn't about jewels anymore. This was about lineage and the survival of what the Queen Mother once called true monarchy. Anne had watched the unfolding chaos from a deliberate distance, observing as the family teetered on the edge of a silent war. But even distance has its limits, and when whispers reached her ears of Camilla's maneuvering of inventories, legal reviews, and veiled attempts to reframe the inheritance, she acted. Not with headlines, not with declarations, but with presence. Days after the vault's reveal, Anne arrived at Beatrice's side without escort or fanfare. They disappeared into a private wing, and when they emerged, something had shifted. One aide whispered she looked at the tiaras. Then she nodded. That's all it took. Anne's gesture may have been quiet, but the ripple it sent through the palace was thunderous. Within hours, she ordered the cancellation of Camilla's proposed review of royal heirlooms. Her reasoning was simple but absolute. The Queen Mother's will was final, and no crown, no matter how recent, would alter it. To the institution, it was a line drawn in royal sand. To Beatrice, it was a lifeline, but the move wasn't spontaneous. Hidden behind Anne's unflinching exterior was a memory few knew existed. In a private note discovered within the Queen Mother's correspondence, one sentence stood out: "Protect her. She will face fire." The letter had been addressed not to the monarch, not to an aide, but to Anne. A direct instruction from the past, reminding her that sometimes duty didn't wear a crown, it wore resolve. To solidify her stance, Anne quietly circulated an internal letter to senior palace officials and archival trustees. In it, she referred to Beatrice's inheritance as undisputed and a matter of legacy, not legality. The message was unmistakable: no more challenges, no more questioning. The vault's contents belonged to Beatrice, not by loophole, but by destiny. The history between them ran deeper than many realized. On Beatrice's 18th birthday, away from flashing cameras and royal rituals, Anne had gifted her a delicate sapphire brooch once belonging to the Queen Mother. At the time, it seemed like a token gesture. Now it feels like prophecy. Beatrice kept it close ever since. "It was always yours," Anne had whispered then. And now, all these years later, her actions echo those same words. But as Anne shields Beatrice from political arrows, another figure lurks in the shadows, questioning how much longer tradition will protect this fragile balance. King Charles is trapped in a storm of bloodlines, promises, and personal guilt. His niece has become a lightning rod for a monarchy already on edge. Does he preserve peace or honor the words his mother whispered in her final days about the girl who carries grace like armor? The corridors of Buckingham are no stranger to conflict, but rarely has the weight of decision rested this heavily on Charles's shoulders. Camilla's fury has become deafening behind closed doors, her sense of betrayal sharpened by the public silence of the crown. At the same time, Anne's unwavering defense of Beatrice echoes louder in the family's conscience than any speech. For Charles, the tension between two powerful women in his life, one his queen, the other his sister, has created a pressure cooker within the monarchy, one mistake away from boiling over. He walks a razor-thin line, aware that any interference might not just damage his legacy, but splinter a family already stretched to its limits. According to palace insiders, Charles took the vault documents into his private study and reviewed them alone. For hours, he remained behind locked doors, his staff ordered not to disturb him. What he read reportedly stunned him, not just the contents of the bequeathment, but the clarity of the Queen Mother's intent. Her words were unflinching, her handwriting unmistakable. There were no loopholes, no vagueness to hide behind. She had chosen Beatrice, and she had meant for the choice to stand unchallenged. In that quiet, Charles found himself haunted by more than one matriarch. He remembered a moment with Queen Elizabeth, years before her passing, when she spoke of Beatrice with rare, heartfelt admiration. "She reminds me of myself," she had said, not to flatter, but as a warning. There is something in her that endures without noise, without need. It was a sentiment Charles hadn't understood then, but now, staring at the Queen Mother's final words, it became undeniable. Beatrice wasn't a mistake. She was a mirror of a past monarchical strength, a quiet force who had earned more than anyone realized. Aides close to the king recall an emotional moment shortly after. Charles stood alone on a palace balcony, watching Beatrice from a distance as she met with staff inside the garden courtyard. They say he appeared motionless, hand pressed to the railing, and when he turned away, his eyes were red. This was not just about jewels. This was about the future of the family, one that now hinged on loyalty, legacy, and restraint. When the time came to respond to Camilla's pressure, Charles made his position devastatingly clear. There would be no override, no review, no revocation. The Queen Mother's wishes would be honored in full. The bequeathment would remain exactly as written. And Beatrice, for better or worse, would carry the legacy forward alone if necessary. But as one storm calms, another brews a legal claim that threatens to expose secrets the royal family has buried for generations. What if the Queen Mother's hidden will wasn't technically enforceable? Legal advisors to the monarchy begin circling the matter with caution. If challenged in court, the jewels could become public property or worse, spark a constitutional crisis unlike anything seen in Windsor history. Behind the grandeur of tradition and titles, legal uncertainty now slithered through palace walls like smoke. What had first appeared to be an unshakable bequeathment, signed, sealed, and sealed again, was now under quiet scrutiny by the monarchy's most trusted legal minds. A single question cast a long shadow. Were the vault's contents ever formally registered under Crown possession, or were they considered private property? If the lines blurred, so too could the Queen Mother's intentions in the eyes of law. What began as a family matter now threatened to become a national flashpoint. Within days, Camilla's advisors began preparing their strategy. Rumors erupted that her camp was exploring a narrow but powerful channel, an appeal through the Duchy of Lancaster. If the jewels were somehow connected to Duchy holdings, she could challenge their classification and, by extension, Beatrice's right to hold them uncontested. It was a daring move, but it wasn't without risk. Challenging the Queen Mother's personal judgment in court would drag the crown into territory it had long avoided, legal exposure of its most secret vaults. Beatrice, however, wasn't naive. Palace insiders revealed she had quietly retained her own legal counsel, an understated but decisive act. She didn't issue statements, she didn't offer rebuttals. But behind the scenes, preparations were underway. She wasn't defending just a vault of jewels. She was defending the judgment of a matriarch, the trust of a legacy, and a symbolic inheritance far more potent than anything held in gold. Meanwhile, the outside world began to fracture into camps. Tabloids exploded with headlines. Political commentators debated monarchy overreach on primetime panels. Some public figures, traditionally silent on royal matters, began tweeting cryptic statements of support or disapproval. And then came the whispers within Westminster itself. Was the crown shielding Beatrice? Was this a smokescreen for something even deeper? Questions poured in faster than answers could be drafted, but the most dangerous element was yet to come, because legal exposure rarely isolates itself. Should this case proceed publicly, buried royal assets, hidden estates, unrecorded heirlooms, forgotten trusts could all be dragged into the spotlight. And for a family whose power is built on legacy, secrecy, and symbolism, that exposure could fracture more than relationships. It could dismantle the invisible scaffolding that holds the crown together. Yet before the law could decide anything, Beatrice makes a move so bold, so unexpected it changes everything. She could have kept the jewels locked away. She could have stayed silent. But instead, in front of the cameras, Princess Beatrice opened the vault and placed the Queen Mother's favorite tiara in a museum exhibit labeled, "For the future queens, named or not." It wasn't just a statement, it was a revolution. There was no announcement, no grand proclamation, just an invitation to the Royal Trust exhibition, quietly updated with a single new edition, Legacy of Sovereign Women. When the doors opened, the world saw what the family never expected. The sapphire-studded diadem worn by the Queen Mother during the darkest days of the Blitz. A brooch once passed between Queen Mary and Elizabeth II, and the ruby set nestled beside the Queen Mother's personal diary, opened to a single underlined passage. "Give to her what cannot be taken, dignity." These pieces weren't just artifacts. They were Beatrice's answer to every whisper, every raised eyebrow, every challenge to her worth. And then came the moment no one foresaw. Beatrice stepped forward, not as a claimant, not as a rebel, but as a steward of something far greater. Her voice trembled with emotion, but her words cut with precision. "These jewels belong not to privilege, but to endurance. They are the legacy of women who carried without complaint, who led without credit, who endured without reward." There was no crown on her head, but in that moment, there didn't need to be. She had become something rarer than a monarch. She had become a symbol. The public response was immediate. Social media erupted with praise. Hashtags honoring Beatrice trended globally within minutes. Commentators who once dismissed her as quiet or peripheral now lauded her as the embodiment of quiet power. She had turned a scandal into a standard, a private inheritance into public purpose. At a time when the monarchy faced skepticism, she had offered it meaning. Even Princess Charlotte, during a scheduled school tour days later, was seen pointing to the exhibit with wide-eyed wonder. It was more than curiosity. It was recognition. One figure, however, was conspicuously absent. Queen Camilla, who had once considered these jewels her rightful symbols of reign, was seen leaving Windsor the morning of the event. No statement, no acknowledgement, just departure. The message was as clear as the silence that followed. The battle had ended, and not in her favour. And as the cameras flash and the jewels glitter under soft museum lights, one thing is clear: this wasn't just about inheritance. It was about identity, redemption, and a granddaughter who honoured a grandmother's legacy by rewriting royal history. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.